Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders, viewable on M. Oppenheim TV and YouTube. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we're chatting with leaders from Brilliant Corners, which is based in San Francisco and Los Angeles, providing supportive housing solutions. We're going to be talking with Bill Pickel, CEO, Serena Field, Senior Director of Housing Development and Management, and Chris Contreras, Chief Operating Officer. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I'm so excited about this. And I'm going to go straight over to you, Bill, because I love what you say on your website. You say right up front, the housing crisis is not about broken people, but it's about broken systems. So talk about those broken systems. How are our systems broken?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk about our work. We do say that we're not about fixing broken people. We're about fixing broken systems. And, even when we say broken systems, it's not necessarily beating up on the public agencies at the federal, state, and local level who support the needs of community members, individuals, households, families. It's just the nature of these large bureaucratic systems, incredibly complex. And for right or wrong, we have sort of divided up people into different component parts. So every community has a public agency that's trying to meet the needs of the elderly. Every community has a special system that's trying to meet the needs of people who have become homeless. We have a system for people with developmental disabilities. We have an affordable housing system, which is separate from the market-based housing system. So we have this fragmented welter of public agencies, and then they're at the federal, state, county, and city levels. And if you're a person who is living with a disability, a chronic medical condition, maybe you have a developmental delay. Maybe you're exiting a public system. It could be a carceral system or a care system. Imagine you're exiting into the highest cost housing markets in the nation, here in coastal California. Where Brilliant Corners shows up is to try to reduce some of that complexity and really maddening mystery around what door can I knock on to help me obtain and keep stable, affordable housing. And there are so many extremely low income, very low income, and vulnerable Californians across many different population subsets that are facing this challenge. And at Brilliant Corners, we realize that for all of their focus on their mission, the public agencies in California communities that are trying to meet the needs of these different vulnerable populations are not purpose-built to crack open the housing market.
Let me jump in here because you said a lot in a very short period of time. So let me just see if I can segment this. One of the things that you have said is that in any neighborhood, in any community, there are going to be people who are less well off, less educated, less employed. They might have mental health challenges or physical health challenges. Maybe they have cancer. Maybe they have come out of an addiction treatment program and are trying to stay in this area where you're not addicted. Okay, you've got all these different things. Maybe you have a disability, but that is a normal community circumstance. There are going to be people like that, and what you're saying is that there's no housing for a whole group of these people. And one of the issues, right, Serena, is that you end up with bureaucracies that are not necessarily smoothly addressing these various needs. Is that about how you experience it, Serena?
Yeah, I mean, my teams are more focused on the small licensed care residential development of homes serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But you can see it clearly in some of the challenge that we hear in this community where there isn't housing available for individuals with IDD. So the acronym for it. If they're more independent livers, or if they're, living with parents and their parents pass away, what is their next step? So I do think it is a real challenge. I do think we see our government partners struggling with that. And it's funny, I was actually taking notes about what does the future look like for serving folks with IDD? Like, how can we participate in that?
IDD, could you give us the acronym?
Yes, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay, so let's say I'm an individual and I have this challenge.
Mhm.
I'm a child that is aging out of the foster care system. I've hit the age limit, and now I'm trying to find a job. I might not be paid that much, and with what little I've been able to earn, I'm trying to figure out a place to live. Let's say I've been injured, okay, and I cannot actually work full time. I cannot create that income. There's no place for me, right? That's what you're talking about. You're saying that basically, no matter what you do, you you cannot stay where you are because there's no place for you to rest your head. Chris, when you're looking at this from your perspective as the chief operating officer of this entity, how do you organize to address such a massive problem? Because we're talking about, right, Bill? We're talking about a percentage of our population. What is the percent of people who do not have a place to stay in these coastal areas that are so expensive?
No, that's right. For instance, in the state of California, we have just a bit north of 187,000 individuals that are currently homeless at last count.
187,000 people. Those are the counted individuals, and that doesn't really even get everybody who is
No, that's right.
Temporarily housed, insufficiently housed. It's couch surfing, staying with their parents, and so on and so forth. 187,000 people. That's a town.
That's right. And what we're seeing is that the major issues are that we have a housing shortage, a crisis in that, and then we also have the crisis of affordability. So people cannot afford the rents in their communities anymore. So we see the inflow of individuals falling into homelessness outpacing the individuals that are getting helped into permanent housing. So organizations like Brilliant Corners throughout the state are really tasked with coming up with innovative ways to really address that issue and provide housing solutions for individuals in need of housing. And in Brilliant Corners, Brilliant Corners' role in our homeless services programs is really to focus on locating existing housing that may be out in the community that people just don't have access to. It is also about perhaps spurring the creation of new housing in these communities through innovative models. And then it's about sort of supporting people to be ushered into that housing and maintain that housing for a long time, hopefully for the rest of their lives. So that's really what we're focused on. So we're operating our programs, we're really specializing in working with landlords, working with clients to get people into homes. So our social workers don't have to, so our government partners don't have to. So we're really supporting those individuals.
We see different estimates, but let's say at least 1 million units that California would need to build that are affordable for extremely low income folks. Like, we have a huge shortage. And Brilliant Corners does real estate development. We develop multifamily permanent supportive housing as well as our residential care homes. And we're part of coalitions across the state that are strongly advocating, for example, for a new affordable housing bond so we can build more of those 1 million needed units. At the same time, our approach has been to say, hey, we've got folks who can't wait however many years, maybe decades it takes for California to catch up in housing production. So as tight and as expensive as our housing markets are, we can develop pinpointed, we think somewhat more efficient strategies to get access to the existing units that are out there. So the vacancy rates in the communities we're working in may be very, very low, and the price points may be unaffordable. When we pair our landlord engagement services and partnerships with landlords and developers with our tenancy support services and rent subsidy administration, we've demonstrated that we can house, I think now, over 17,000 extremely low-income Californians and counting.
And one of the things that I think is very interesting about this point is that if you take a look at the interests of property owners, these interests actually intersect. So, for example, if you take a look at what Dignity Moves does, and they're a client of ours, so they take very often asphalt lots or places that are not inhabited but need to be secured, and now they transform them into sheltered communities. And all of a sudden, you don't have homelessness encampment. You have people receiving some care and some treatment. It allows them to get ahead of this homelessness crisis in their own personal lives. And you go from having a lot that needs to be secured that becomes a drain on a landowner to being an asset for the landowner, because they now are able to use that land productively until they get it developed. So, and it doesn't take it out of development permanently. It just provides a solution, right? So you've got these coalition of interests. I'd like to ask you all about that aspect, because there's this idea that somehow, because housing stock is rare and we can't necessarily build it, somehow we're frozen in place and we can't address things. But if you take a look around, you walk through any urban environment, you see empty stores. Any urban environment today, you see empty storefronts, you see empty buildings, you see underutilized resources, and so on. Now, maybe that's not a housing solution immediately, but shouldn't we be thinking a little bit differently? Because when you see underutilized resources and you've got this huge problem, there's got to be a way to connect the dots. Bill, this is one of the things I wanted to, before I so rudely interrupted you, it's one of the things I wanted to sort of jump on, because you started off talking about friction in the system. So could you all talk a little bit about how you can remove and how you have removed some of that friction in order to create a solution?
Maybe I'll say just a frame and then see if Chris and or Serena want to jump in. Two things come up for me here. One is that I remember one of our government partners who was a real, sort of path breaker in helping design the Los Angeles County Flexible Housing Subsidy Pool, which we operate in partnership with the county. And I remember him saying, when you fly into LA, you fly into the LA basin and you look down and you see that there are buildings as far as the eye can see, in spite of the fact that we know that there's a shortage of affordable housing units, you could not possibly say that there's no opportunities when you look down at the LA basin in the built environment or in small infill sites, right? And so, yes, Brilliant Corners does show up, and with partner agencies, we're building the 50 or 100 unit permanent multifamily housing complex, but we're also taking advantage of all of those hidden gems, like you talked about with Dignity Moves, that there is a landlord that, while profit motivated and needing to make a living off of their portfolio of buildings, they want to give back. They want to be part of the solution. And we might get 10 units in a 50 unit building or 1 unit in a 10 unit building. And then Serena and her team might see an opportunity to acquire a single family home and convert it into a state-of-the-art residential care home with person-centered on-site services and a permanent deed restriction for use by Californians with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we're kind of in a space of adaptive reuse of existing resources that we can then match to the most vulnerable and extremely low-income members of our community. So, that was sort of a frame, but I think, maybe Chris or Serena, if you want to chime in there around the ways that we operationalize our mission.
Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to add to that, Bill, is just how important the partnership is. The partnership piece between nonprofits or other organizations with your government partners, I feel like that's where you really get the secret sauce to innovation. So if you have that strong partnership and you can work really well with your government partner, for the storefronts that you mentioned, Mark, maybe it's a little bit of flexibility in the zoning for a certain area where you create more housing resources and you're using an existing site. So I think with strong partnership comes innovation, and hopefully you're working with somebody that has a little bit more flexibility to address a real core issue.
And also the nonprofit partners. I look at an organization like Urban Alchemy, right, which is trying to galvanize these communities of people who, might be unemployed. They might have had interactions with law enforcement or with addiction or whatever, right? And there are people within those communities that understand the communities, understand the need, and can actually reshape those communities into higher functioning groups, right? They have expertise. They're your partners. Chris, when you take a look at other types of partnerships that you have, and you're operationalizing this so that that kind of partnership ends up resulting in solutions and not friction and not loss of as you're communicating and as you're trying to figure it out. How do you set up the organization so that those types of partnerships end up being welcomed and gain traction very quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here at Brilliant Corners, we really focus on sort of our lane on the housing front, and we really believe that having us specialize in that really allows our partner agencies, all of the agencies who are providing intensive case management services or who are supporting individuals out in the community, to really focus on just that, on supporting the individual. So if we're taking one of the hardest pieces out of the equation, which is the housing, and finding that and having somebody move into a house, then I think that's really what makes the difference and what we look to operationalize here. We also operate in a housing first model where we really look to prioritize permanent housing for individuals without any preconditions. So we all need a home to be able to focus on other areas of our lives. And without a stable home, we're never going to get there, right? So that is really our focus and what we're doing here at Brilliant Corners.
So, Bill, when you take a look at what Chris said and you operationalize that, I'm a wonky guy, right? Organizations are built by people who have expertise, right? And that expertise has to work together. You're talking about focusing, right? That's what you said, Chris, on sticking to your knitting, sticking to your specialty. You allow room for people with other complementary specialties. But then, Bill, when you're hiring people, you're looking at, do they understand the real estate development, implications? Do they understand how to do planning for depreciation and repairing of facilities? Are they selecting a facility so that it can be maintained, so you're not acquiring something that becomes a problem immediately? What other competencies do you look for, Bill, when you put together your various team members?
That's also a great question, Mark. Nonprofits are businesses, and they're mission-driven businesses. Here at Brilliant Corners, we say that we are person-centered. We want to meet each resident client, frankly, each business partner, each colleague, where they're at, and we do individualized housing plans for folks. And at the same time, we're doing this work at scale, and questions of financial sustainability, efficient operations, and really adding value to our public agency partners that are entrusting us with this work really are a dominant theme within the organization. We hire for such a broad range of skills, all the classic departments: finance, operations, people operations, data and technology, and then we have our program and property teams. But what I would say is that we're hiring for that person-centered mindset and also a can-do mindset. I like to think, and think our track record speaks to this, that we have a little bit of a entrepreneurial, almost for-profit mindset, a culture of excellence. We don't want to let down our colleagues, our public agency funders, our philanthropic partners, and most of all, our residents and clients. And so you've got to hit that double bottom line of really being sharp and on your game, and therefore able to replicate and scale solutions that work, and not work your agency out of business, but never losing sight of the person-centered values at the heart of it and the housing first values at the heart of it.
So important, right? It's basically about efficient operations, using money really wisely, right? But also not thinking about how to move money into your pockets or this person's pockets or that person's pockets. Basically trying to ensure that people are getting compensated for their work, but any work is tied to community benefit, and it's broad community benefit. It's not just one person. It's not even just the homeless person. It's also the property owner that is thinking about how their property that is underutilized can be used for some benefit, right, in some sustainable way, right? Serena, I mean, it's about how do you help a government entity with a mission achieve their objective in a way that makes them think that government funds are being well spent, right, Chris? I mean, it's all of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And one thing I didn't mention, just to go back a little bit when you were talking about operationalizing, what we do, I think we really lean into the flexible housing subsidy pool model. And that's a model that has been replicated in many different communities across the country now. We operate flexible type models in Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. And what that model really does is it sort of breaks our teams up into three different categories. So one is we have a housing location team that is strictly focused on working with landlords and partnering with them from a more, housing real estate perspective. Like we understand that landlords need to make ends meet. We believe that they're part of the solution. So they really have that one-stop shop of support in that team. So those are boots on the ground every day, just looking for housing and building those partnerships with landlords in support of our government partners and the individuals that need housing. We also have a tenancy support services team. This is the team that's focused on ushering people into housing. So helping them with applications, helping them pay for the housing rental application, working with landlords to make sure that individuals are the right fit for the units that we're finding for them. And these individuals on the tenancy support services team are really there to focus on housing retention after somebody moves in. So after somebody moves in, we're going to focus on that individual in collaboration with intensive case management providers, and the landlord and our government partners are going to have that support in knowing that that individual has permanent supportive housing. And then the last team is our operations team. We're in many ways seen as a fiscal intermediary for a lot of government partners in the sense that we have to administer rent in a very precise, equitable, clear way every month. So just in LA alone, we operationalized the administration of over $8 million in rental subsidies on behalf of the individuals that we have living in LA County. And those payments, need to be paid to landlords on time. Government funders need to know that they're being utilized appropriately and tagged to the right funding streams. So there's a whole operation that sort of goes into that. So like that model, we believe that centralization of that model across continuums within cities or counties is really what it takes to solve homelessness and come together to do that.
I love that. And Bill, what I'm hearing from Chris is this philosophy almost of they're no opponents, they're only current allies and potential allies, right? Yeah, it's a particular mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to bring that mindset and then, watch it happen. As I always think about people coming to a four-way stop and, either you're all giving each other the finger or you're saying, no, you go first. And it's sort of contagious if you're like, show up with the right partnership and collaborative mindset. Something that came up for me in listening to Chris is that, throughout everything that Brilliant Corners does, is there a cost to the state of California, to the city and county of Los Angeles? Yes, there is, but we feel, we take very seriously, our responsibility to use government funds wisely. And, the vast majority of the funds that flow through Brilliant Corners are being passed on in the form of rent subsidies, move-in assistance payment, mortgage payments, and things like that just pass through our agency. But they pass through in support of models that not only are effective in terms of getting people off the streets or out of institutions and helping them stabilize in their own housing in the community, but everything we do, every housing project that we're involved in is a long-term value for the state of California and California communities. Every one of our nearly 300 residential care homes that we've developed in partnership with the 21 regional centers from the Oregon border to the Mexico border represent a new model where California's investment in the creation of those badly needed homes is preserved in perpetuity. Every one of those properties is deed restricted for the use of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities forever. The same thing in our multifamily affordable housing, long-term deed restrictions, usually 55 years. And even at that point, we would just recapitalize the projects and they would stay in service as affordable and supportive housing. And then those rent subsidies, 8 million a month and higher if you add in communities like San Diego and San Francisco. The value there is not only getting people into housing and helping them stay there, not only helping landlords and property owners and developers say, hey, I'm giving back. I can be part of the solution in my community. I'm in a durable, positive, mutually beneficial partnership with Brilliant Corners. But in fact, there's savings that are somewhat hard to see across many public systems. When we are able, with our partners, to move somebody from a shelter or street homelessness into their own apartment unit, there are hard to quantify savings across public health systems, emergency rooms, psychiatric, paramedic, prison and jail, the carceral system. It's hard to capture those costs in real time, but we know that they...
No, you're absolutely wrong. I'm sorry. I'm going to totally disagree with you. It's not hard. Just open your eyes, right? We've all seen homeless encampments, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen them. We've all seen neighborhoods that fall apart. We've all seen them. We've all seen people with no place to go.
Yeah.
We've all seen them. The fact
even a cost to businesses. Imagine you're running a restaurant on a city block. Where's a lot of folks on the street with no roof over their head?
I've seen a neighborhood collapse into disrepair with all the businesses starting to fall apart, haven't you? We've all seen them. What I think we haven't done, and I'd love Serena to take us out on these ideas. What we don't do is we don't see that and also see the costs. We think that there's a cost to housing, but we don't process that there's a cost to that as well, to the destruction of neighborhood, the destruction of cities. Serena, as the director of housing management, what you're basically doing is you're helping to create cohesion and glue, and make sure that 187,000 unhoused people, which is a total undercount, which is, 20 to 25% of the population of San Francisco, right? And that's in our state only. That those people, if they didn't have these types of solutions, what would happen, right? That's the destruction of a huge, huge urban environment. Talk a little bit and then take us out, Serena, about how we should actually think about community and about housing as an important asset for all of us, whether we're housed or unhoused.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's such a huge topic, and I'll tell you, I don't think it can be done by one organization. I think we're seeing right now at Brilliant Corners how all the various lines of business that we have under our own roof, how we can really come together and get more innovative and come up with hopefully some really good scalable solutions. But I do have to say, I think it's bigger than just homelessness. We mentioned the folks with IDD. I think when we talk about community, we really need to be inclusive of various populations that are struggling with housing. And I think it's an ongoing conversation that we're having at Brilliant Corners. And we're at this really nice pivot point where I think we're seeing how truly like our development and our services come together. And so I'm really hopeful for the future that we'll come up with something really grand that can help make an impact and really just continue to create community in California.
Hope, engagement, and action. Bill Pickel, CEO, Serena Fields, Director of Housing Management of Brilliant Corners, and Chris Contreras, Chief Operating Officer. Please thank everyone involved. Thank your clients, your staff, your donors, your property owners, your partners. Bill, Chris, Serena, this has just been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us.
Oh, thanks for having
a lot, Mark.
Thanks.